Hi, I'm Dr. Adam Fields. I'm a chiropractor. 30 years ago, a cave was discovered in Vietnam. This is called Sun Dung, and people went spelunking deep down into the recesses of this cave. And what did they find? They found species of plants and fungi that they've never seen before. And first thing people are thinking is, wow, could we find a cure for certain diseases? Could we help people? And then you have people going to the rainforests in Brazil looking for somewhere, somehow, to help people. Well, you've heard me say that self-care is high quality, hands-on healthcare. And that's what I believe in, right? Not that we don't need those other things, but what if it's even closer than our hands? What if it's under our noses? What if breath was actually a cure for many diseases that befall our world? Well, there's a man named Patrick McKeown. He wrote Oxygen Advantage. He wrote The Breathing Cure, an amazing deep dive into breath. And he is the Director of Education and Training at Oxygen Advantage and at the Buteyko Clinic International. He was actually trained by Buteyko himself. He's written 7 books. He is published, and I am excited to have him here today. Patrick, hello and welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much, Dr. Fields.
Oh, so good to have you. Call me Adam.
Sure.
So I am thrilled because I'm sure you had such an aha moment, right? When all of a sudden the blinders were lifted and you had really, pun intended, the breath taken out of you. When did that happen with breathing? When did you all of a sudden say, I need to alter my life here? This is world changing.
Oh, it was just by accident. I was reading an article in a newspaper and I read about the work of Ukrainian doctor Konstantin Buteyko. And he said, breathe in and out through your nose. And he said that your breathing should be light. And mine was neither. I always had chronic nasal congestion. I always had poor sleep quality and my concentration was terrible. And I had asthma. And of course, when you have asthma, you're very likely having nasal congestion, and then you're breathing through your mouth, and then your upper chest breathing. You're breathing faster and breathing harder, and like it has a knock-on effect. So I started putting his technique into practice, and it really helped me pretty quickly. And even the nose and blocking exercise, just by simply breathing in and out through my nose, holding my nose, and gently nodding my head up and down while holding the breath, and it helped to decongest my nose. I knew there was something in it. And I think the other thing, Adam, it was when I started breathing less air, because breathing less air flies in the face of what we often hear,
Right.
and also what's espoused in yoga, for example. The temperature in my hands increased. I always had cold hands and cold feet. So if you're able to decongest your nose in a few minutes, and if you can feel the temperature of your hands increasing in a few minutes, you know there's something in it.
You imagine circulation all over your body probably got better, even your brain.
Yeah. And it's like, of course, I didn't know the physiology at the time. My degree is in a completely different subject. And it was 2 or 3 years later that I decided that I really felt it was the right thing to do to start training in this field. And it didn't make logical sense. Many people laughed at it. You know, breathing now is hot, but it wasn't back then. There's a huge difference.
Right. Breathing is trending. Yeah, it's very
It
big right
is.
now. Yeah. In
Yes.
fact, you're breathing about 20,000 times a day. So
Yes, yes.
it's interesting because, right, we always, oh, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. And, in your book, you talk about taking a breath so that your nose hairs aren't even moving.
Like I think we all understand this intuitively. If somebody walks into our room and if they are overly breathless for a very light degree of physical exercise or light intensity of physical exercise, you're going to say there's something up. Or if somebody is running out of air while they're talking to you, or if they are sighing frequently. Whenever we see people who are breathing a little bit too fast and too hard, at the very least we'll say they're unfit. We might say they're feeling maybe a little bit uncomfortable or maybe a little bit stressed. So despite when somebody is breathing a little bit faster and a little bit harder and feeling air hunger and mouth breathing, despite the obvious implications of that in health, it's still often encouraged in breathing practice. And, sometimes in getting this point across, I will always ask my own clients, how does your breathing change when you get stressed? Does it get faster or slower? Is it
Mm,
upper chest or is it driven more by the diaphragm? Is it
mm,
mouth? Is it nose? Is it harder? Is it soft? Is it regular? Is it irregular? And they will typically say that when they get stressed, their breathing speeds up, becomes harder, they feel air hunger, they're breathing upper chest, they may stop breathing, they may be sighing. And then we say, okay, let's do the opposite. And then they get it. Light
mhm.
breathing, slow breathing, deep breathing. But deep breathing not in how the population interpret it. The instruction is correct. All it means is have good recruitment of your diaphragm. But the
Mhm.
interpretation of it is not correct in many instances.
So you want people to breathe light, slow, and deep, right?
Yes.
So the question, let's take a dive into sleep for a moment. You're saying in your book, you say 4.5 to 6.5 breaths per minute.
If we want to bring balance to the autonomic nervous system, the ideal respiratory rate to practice at different times during the day would be between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute. And, to practice that for, say, 10 minutes twice daily. But normal respiratory rate is 10, 14 breaths per minute, 10 to 14 breaths per minute. Now, the only thing about the respiratory rate is it doesn't focus on tidal volume. It doesn't focus on the volume of air that we are drawing into the lungs with each breath. So it doesn't consider minute ventilation. And I think the easiest way to explain this is in terms of food. If somebody hands you a plate of food and you're looking at the plate, you're looking at the volume of food on the plate. That's what we really need to be considered. It's not the number of forkfuls. Because
Mm,
of course the size of the fork, it could be a small fork or it could be a large fork.
mm,
So in terms of breathing, we should also be looking at minute volume. So minute volume is the volume of air that we breathe over the course of that minute. How do we breathe that? Well, that's the respiratory rate, which in food terms would be the number of forkfuls
mhm.
multiplied by the tidal volume, which in food terms would be the size of the fork. So the number of forkfuls by the size of the fork determines the volume of food that we eat off the plate.
In one
And
minute,
likewise in breathing, in one
right?
minute.
In
Yes.
1 minute. So it's not 4.5 to 6, because I'm sitting there, gosh, I've got my aura ring. I'm measuring my thing at night, right? I'm getting into it. I'm like, oh, this is like 13 breaths per minute. What's wrong with me? I have a problem here. So what you're saying is more when you practice your breathing, practice slowing down. Now, when you breathe at 4.5 to 6.5 breaths per minute, and I'm often doing like a 5 second in, maybe a 7 second out, something like that. You want to create air hunger, so you don't worry about taking a huge breath. Then is what you're saying, or do you?
Correct.
Oh, don't. Okay, just a
Yeah, no,
quiet breath.
I'll go through it. Okay, so if we look at breathing from a biochemical dimension, and if we want to improve our tolerance to carbon dioxide or to reduce the chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide, the objective is to breathe less air over that period of time. And we do this by either making the size of the breath in smaller or shorter, and also by slowing down the respiratory rate. And when we breathe less air, carbon dioxide is not able to leave the body so quickly. So it accumulates in the lungs, and then it will increase in the blood. And of course, carbon dioxide is the primary stimulus to breathe. So we are deliberately exposing our body to increased carbon dioxide in the blood in order to improve our tolerance to the gas. Because if somebody has a strong sensitivity to carbon dioxide, if they are overly sensitive to the accumulation of carbon dioxide, it means that their everyday breathing, they will often feel air hunger. And because of the air hunger, they will breathe faster in upper chest to compensate. So the biomechanics of breathing are influenced by the biochemical dimension of breathing. So if we just say to some person then, well, what I want you to do is to breathe with optimal recruitment of the diaphragm, which would be a good instruction. But unless we alleviate the air hunger, which is driving upper chest breathing in the first place,
Mm,
we may not have a long-term solution. And the other thing is, of course, addressing mouth breathing. So the biochemical dimension is, yes, it is about breathing less air, but I don't always time it because, say, for example, we have somebody coming in, and you will see your clients and patients coming in. They may have a respiratory rate of 16, 17, 18, 19, or even 20 breaths per minute. So we'll say that their respiratory rate, and these are the people who need most help, their everyday breathing pattern during rest is 20 breaths per minute. If all of a sudden we bring them from 20 breaths down to 6 breaths per minute, it's too much of a drop. And this in turn is going to create air hunger, and they're going to feel very uncomfortable. So oftentimes I'll say to the person, listen, don't worry during the biochemical dimension of breathing, don't worry about your respiratory rate. Just focus on softening the speed of your breathing and taking less air into your body. Slow down your breathing relative to what you feel is comfortable, and
Mhm.
slow it down relative to the point you feel a tolerable air hunger, because
Mhm.
that will signify that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood and you're getting the benefits. Like people talk about the carbon dioxide, this waste gas. Do they know the functions of carbon dioxide? It opens up your blood vessels, it opens up your airways, it lowers blood pH slightly to allow hemoglobin, which is the main carrier of oxygen, to release oxygen more readily to the
Mm.
tissues and organs.
Amazing.
It's the primary drive to breathe. It plays a role, in terms of the oxygenation and blood flow throughout our body is influenced by the volume of air we breathe and with that carbon dioxide. And I think it's a wonderful gas, but oftentimes there's a lot of bad press associated with it.
Right, right. Carbon dioxide's making a comeback, and you're giving it some good press for sure. We
A
need it
little.
a little.
And it used to be the benefits of carbon dioxide were understood up until about 1930 or so. And there was one doctor, Dr. Waters, based in a hospital, I believe in the United States, and he started vilifying carbon dioxide. He was saying it's toxic, it's this, it's that, the other. And over the course of 10 years, the importance of carbon dioxide got lost. So oftentimes fashion can influence breathing, and it's the same with the yoga world. I've just finished writing today, a book on breathing for yoga. We
Congratulations.
looked at how breathing in yoga was taught up until 1880. It was all about light breathing and subtle breathing and conservation of the breath.
Right.
And then this movement happened in Europe called the hygienic movement. And with that, the instruction was to take these full big breaths, because at that time they believed that if you took full big breaths, you improved aeration throughout the lungs. And as a result, the body was less susceptible to the spreading of germs such as tuberculosis. And that idea took hold in Europe and went to the East, went to India and came back, changed breathing in yoga.
Mm.
So when we see the modern breathing that's often instructed in yoga, the full big breath, and you hear people around you breathing on purpose,
Yeah, well, that's right.
that can signify overbreathing. Do those proponents and also do the students realize that by breathing too much air, it's having the opposite effect on what they want? Blood vessels can be constricting, blood pH increases, which causes arousal of the central nervous system, can put us into a fight or flight response, and also hemoglobin holds on to oxygen more readily. So less oxygen is available throughout the body.
What happened to us in our lives? Let's say somebody's 40 years old and now all of a sudden they're shallow breathing and they're very sensitive to the CO2. How did they get there?
There's a number of factors, Adam, and it's very difficult to pinpoint it. Like, I suppose to answer that question, one could ask, how were we living as human beings even 50 and 100 years ago?
Right.
We would have been doing a lot of physical exercise. We were in natural environments. We were eating natural food. We had less competitive pressures. And there is a genetic component of it. But people who undergo stress and trauma, that increases their sensitivity to carbon dioxide. 75% of people with panic disorder and anxiety have dysfunctional breathing patterns.
Mm.
And their dysfunctional breathing, which is a little bit faster breathing, harder breathing, irregular breathing, they may be feeling air hunger, that's going to feed into their anxiety and panic symptoms.
Oh, yeah.
So another thing is talking, excessive talking. Like, how many of us during our jobs were talking quite a bit? We have competitive pressures, the foods that we are eating,
Right.
it's and the belief that it's good to take these full big breaths. If one has a belief that you can freely take full big breaths many, many times throughout the day, well, that in turn can establish a habit of over breathing.
Right. Right. Overbreathing. And then I see the mechanics change. people's shoulders come up. They're recruiting their scalenes and these accessory muscles of inhalation, their pec minors getting tight, and then breathing becomes totally inefficient. And what blew my mind here as a chiropractor, in this book was the body mechanics and how breathing changes the body mechanics. And then I forget who said it, but they said every orthopedic rehabilitation should start with breath, right? Because when you think about it, the shoulders go forward, the head goes forward, the knees have different forces on them, the hips have different forces on them, the glutes stop engaging. I mean, everything seems to change.
Mm. There's quite a few papers. When you do a little bit of course, we'd like to see more research. But I've seen, Dr. Josephine Key, Dr. Kyle Kiesel, physical therapist Bradley's. They've really done a lot of work in terms of looking at the relationship between functional breathing and functional movement. And if breathing is dysfunctional, movement is dysfunctional. In other words, you cannot have functional movement without having functional breathing. And yet, if we look at the population, 50% of people with lower back pain are documented to have dysfunctional breathing patterns. And of course, we could ask the question, is it the lower back pain which is going to contribute to dysfunctional breathing? Or is it dysfunctional breathing with reduced generation of intra-abdominal pressure, so there's less stabilization of the spine? Is that feeding into lower back pain? I think in these, there's always going to be a feedback that one is going to affect the other. But I suppose you understand and you have been aware of breathing for many decades, but many people are not, and I think it's very important to realize that connection. And it's not just about how we are breathing inside the studio or on the mat. More importantly is how are we breathing as we go about our normal day-to-day activities. So if, like, say for example, I will always say to my clients, look down at your chest, and they look down at the chest, and then I say, take a breath through the mouth. And when you breathe through your mouth, what part of the body is moving? Are you breathing high or are you breathing low? And typically mouth breathing is going to cause greater amplitude of the upper chest and reduce recruitment of the diaphragm. And yet, if we are to expect our clients to establish optimal breathing patterns from a biochemical and a biomechanical point of view, unless we encourage our clients to breathe through their nose during rest and even during light and moderate physical exercise, during sleep, I don't think we're going to get the long-term outcome that we really want,
They have to breathe through their nose. Yeah, I'm just gonna do I use this actually, and this is the tape that Patrick invented, and it's wonderful because you can talk, you put it on your mouth, you stretch it out about 30% or so, and pull it in. It just gently pulls the lips in. You can still talk if you need to. You can cough if you need to. But it gets to the point where after about a week, you don't even know it's there. It's like almost like a pacifier. You just love it. Great for the marriage if you're talking too much in your marriage. Just kidding. So,
or talking during your sleep, letting out secrets. It might be even better. Who knows?
Right. It's called myotape. I love it. So with breathing, let's talk for a second about exercise and about, obviously we want breathing to be unconscious also. It's like posture. If people are just sitting there all the time going like this, it's not going to work. They have to do things in my office or at home or whatnot to stimulate that unconscious proprioception, right? That unconscious ability. So there's a weird line there, and I've been struggling with it in my own head, right? Because I do yoga, I do Pilates, I do cardio, that type of thing, right? And then I want to do the breathing exercises, slow it down. I want to breathe through my nose. I want to listen to the instructor when she says, pull your belly button into your spine. But yet, how do I diaphragmatic breathe? And should I be thinking of it? Can you just add some clarity on start with something like yoga or exercise or cardio? I mean, cardio, I'm definitely not going so hard that I'm trying to keep my nose as the primary breather. Even when I'm skiing, I'm going, and I tell, the guys on the chairlift, hey guys, let's try and keep our mouths shut the whole way down, and it's fun. It's cold, and then the air is being warmed up and conditioned and moistened, and I'm just hearing your words in my head, but give me some color on that as far as exercise and conscious breathing?
I think the main thing is, I agree with what you said. Breathing is an involuntary activity, and we want it to happen naturally. But at the start, we do have to place some attention on the breath and to be aware and to check in every now and again. You know, like if somebody is doing yoga practice or recreational exercise, why not bring attention to the breath? Not necessary to have the attention on the breath for the entire time, but I do physical exercise in the morning, and my objective is to get in a minimum of 30 minutes a day. I'm not an athlete. I only do physical exercise just for myself, and I will place my attention on my breathing. And why do I do that? It's because I make my physical exercise a meditation. I want to bring attention out of my mind. So I use it also as a training for the brain, a training for the body. And also, then by altering the breath, I can influence blood circulation, including blood flow to the heart, blood flow to the brain, and oxygen delivery. So there are many people, say, for example, perfectionist tendencies, and they are more susceptible to dysfunctional breathing. So, in that regard, I would say never be obsessed about your breathing, because then the very thing that you're looking to change, if you get a little bit stressed about it, it's going to, of course, have the opposite effect. So, we have to kind of approach it with a passive attitude. And the passive attitude is, I don't really care what happens. I'm going to play with the breath. The breath is my friend, and just tuning into it and just even checking in maybe every minute or every 2 minutes or something like that. And of course, it's not timed. Now, the other aspect is that from working with people, I realized that some people actually get anxious when they focus on their breathing, because if they have a background of anxiety in their past, every time that they've had anxiety or panic disorder, it was often associated with a problem with their breathing. So there's an association there between anxiety and the fear of breathlessness or the fear of suffocation. And now, if we tune in on the breath, it can bring on that same degree of anxiety. So, if somebody wants to do breathing exercises, but they're not able to do breathing exercises, or they're not able to focus on the breath, the best breathing exercise is go for a walk, or a fast walk, or even a light jog with your mouth closed. Do your yoga with your mouth closed. So, on a very simple level, by breathing through the nose, carbon dioxide will naturally increase in the blood. And you know this because you feel an increased sensation of air hunger. But the more we breathe through the nose during light, to moderate exercise, and it's not about having an air hunger that's excruciating. It's about having an air hunger. You know it's there, but you feel comfortable with it. Yes, you would like to take in more air, but also to realize that that air hunger, that degree of breathlessness is not due to a drop of oxygen. In actual fact, it's due to an increase of carbon dioxide, and as a result of the increased CO2, there's improved blood flow and oxygen delivery throughout the body. So when you do your physical exercise and you feel that you're not getting enough air because your mouth is closed, your body is getting more oxygen and blood flow than what it would normally do. And it's the same, about bringing this into yoga. So, like if one is going to a yoga class and you're hearing the students around you, you can hear them breathe. Just follow the instruction of the instructor, but just maintain nose and silent breathing. That's all you have to do.
And don't
That's an
worry about the
exercise.
diaphragm. It'll happen. If you're nasal breathing, you're more likely to breathe through your diaphragm.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm not sure if it's difficult to know if that's absolutely. I will absolutely say that nasal breathing is much better than mouth breathing, and if
Right.
one continues mouth breathing, there's not likelihood of getting good biomechanics. You know,
Right.
I think the biomechanical dimension needs to be targeted too.
It
With
does.
manual release, and also with specific attention brought to the area of the diaphragm. So, like
Mm-hmm.
we use, for example, we use a belt just to bring people's awareness to that area, because a lot of people are very much in their mind and they don't have the sensory feedback, or they don't have the feeling of their breathing. And also the risk is that if they focus on breathing with good recruitment of the diaphragm, that they end up taking these full big breaths, but then what they
Right.
will do is sacrifice their breathing from a biochemical point of view. I suppose there's an interconnectedness between the three dimensions of breathing. One is the biochemical, which is focusing on carbon dioxide. One is the biomechanics, which is referring to in simple terms, optimal recruitment of the diaphragm. And then the third one is the psychophysiological. So this is, say, the autonomic nervous system. This is the connection or the feedback from the body up to the brain and vice versa. They're independent dimensions, but there's also some overlap between the three. And we always have to be conscious that if I focus on somebody's breathing from a biomechanical point of view, I don't want to sacrifice their breathing from a biochemical point of view. And if they're hyperventilating, or because, say, for example, if you have a student and they slow down the respiratory rate down to 6 breaths per minute, and in the interim, they increase the tidal volume to even 2 or 3 litres, that will increase their minute ventilation to 18 litres of air per minute. But normal minute ventilation is between 4 and 6. So they are breathing, during that exercise, they are breathing 2 to 3 times more than what they need. And this is going to have an adverse effect from their biochemical dimension and also the psychophysiological dimension. So this is, it's just,
But the mechanical is nice and open and right. So you
yeah,
have to, right.
of course.
Yeah.
Now, you could say, well, for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, I'm going to focus on the biomechanical dimension and I will have my student take these full big breaths. And that's fine. After it, then you're saying to the student, now we're going to recover. We're going to bring your breathing down. So we're going to offset the previous loss of carbon dioxide. So sometimes we kind of do it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense because some people, they don't know how to recruit their diaphragm. So you get the mechanical going, and then you get then you can slow it down. Now that they know how to use it, they can control it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So then the mechanics of the entire body change, the posture. Why is it that people who mouth breathe go forward like this and have forward head posture?
I don't know if the precise mechanisms. Breathing is a little bit more complex, and like I see it written that people say it's a compensatory mechanism. I suppose here's the thing: if we have the mouth open, we can't have the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. So the ideal resting position of the tongue, of course, is 3/4 of the tongue is resting up in the roof of the mouth, and that can only be established with nasal breathing. In order to breathe through the mouth, I have to drop my tongue. When I drop my tongue then is more likely to encroach the airway. Because my tongue is encroaching the airway, I push my head forward to allow air to flow into my airway. So that may
That's
be
interesting.
one
You can feel
possible
it. You can actually
factor.
feel it. Right.
So with nasal breathing and correct tongue resting posture, it does help with, to some degree. Now, of course, you could be talking about text neck and looking into screens and everything else, but
right,
at least getting the mouth closed and the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, at least you're doing something positive in terms of reducing the risk of forward head posture.
Right. Guys, there's so many ways we can go with this conversation. Your knowledge is so deep. I did have a question, though, about the breathing cure. You talked about not sleeping on your back, sleeping on your side. From my perspective, and I've had a lot of people with anxiety that I help get rid of their anxiety. I do deep, agonizing muscle work in between the ribs, in the back, in the front, adjust the ribs, get the rib cage moving, right? And I don't know if that's temporary or not. They probably, of course, they need to get to recruit their diaphragm also, but it helps immensely to the point of, going to the mall and having to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes, or being at a ball game and can't handle the family going to the bathroom or whatever, just like freaking out to, wow, I can't believe I don't have any more anxiety. And I do it on a regular basis with people. Obviously, I'm still doing cranial adjusting to open up the nose and the mouth tape and the whole thing also, but it seems to be wonderful. So my thing is when we're sleeping on our side, and you say, be careful sleeping on your back because the tongue comes back, the mouth opens up, and we start snoring, we're choking on our tongues, we're choking on our soft palate. But now you have the ribs coming forward, and chondrosternal junction, the costochondral junctions are being pushed in, right? In the back, the costovertebral junctions are being pushed in, and now our cage is being, made smaller. If the head goes forward, the scalenes, the accessory muscles of inhalation, are shortening. The pec minor is shortening. So now our breathing mechanism is diminished also. And I know there might be even a case for people sleeping like 3/4 or on their stomach, tough on the face. But, I like the cervical pillow creating a cervical curve. Cervical curve helps breathing also. I do lung capacity testing, and when I do posture correction, and just with posture correction, people's lung capacity goes up. So give me a little more on sleeping on your side versus sleep on your back versus your tummy.
Yeah, I suppose some degree is historical. With my training in terms of looking at breathing from a biochemical dimension initially, with the Buteyko we were always told to sleep on our left hand side.
Wow.
And I did that over the course of 20 years. And then I realized that my face on my left side I have a flat face on my left side. And I think it messed up my nose a bit. But so with the oxygen advantage, I moved away from tradition a little bit because, see, the thing about tradition in any breathing technique is that you typically follow the tradition of the instruction that's being taught there. And tradition can, it doesn't allow a technique necessarily to evolve. Now, I'm going to say that the Buteyko method, I think it's a wonderful technique, but there's always going to be a couple of things that maybe, you could ask a question about. The bigger thing when it comes to sleep is people who have got a risk of obstructive sleep apnea.
Mm,
And it has been shown in different studies that 50% of people with obstructive sleep apnea, their apnea is double when they sleep on their back. Obstructive sleep apnea is a big problem.
hmm.
And it's also a big problem with mental health. Like I'm currently doing a presentation writing on the connection. I wrote it as well in the Breathing Cure a little bit about obstructive sleep apnea. I have a paper written on how we breathe during wakefulness and how it influences our breathing during sleep.
Hmm.
And I co-authored it with two ear, nose, and throat doctors. If we think of obstructive sleep apnea, number one, how common it is, and number two, the effect it has on the body, including increased inflammation, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, like it's linked with dementia, it's
Cognition,
linked with cancer,
diabetes, everything.
cognition, yeah,
Yeah.
weight gain.
What blew
So
my mind was the coordination aspect. You see these kids that are always skinning their knees and things like that and bumping into stubbing their toes. And then you ask about their breathing, their spatial awareness, their ability to, hit a baseball or not, hit a sprinkler when they're running on the lawn or whatnot. I mean, it's incredible. It's
And
it.
just that paper only came out. I don't even think I wrote about that paper. And like there was a study on that in 2019, looking at nasal breathing that it improves visual spatial awareness,
Amazing.
and it is amazing. I think it's partly because you can imagine throughout our evolution, if we were in a wide open plain and we have our eyes on a target in front of us, but of course we have to be scanning the environment around us for predators, and that is with nasal breathing. But yeah, I agree with you, and there is a study that's been shown to support that.
It pushes into every area of your life. I mean, what's great about your book is you just go into every single dimension and how nasal breathing and diaphragmatic breathing affect it. I mean, you read this book and you're like, you just want to shut your mouth. It's incredible.
Part of it was on purpose because I feel that breathing has been so woo woo over so many decades. Breathing has been around for 5 decades minimum in the Western world. How did it not catch root? And I think probably because the language that was used, the communication of the breathing and structure, that they weren't necessarily identifying with the normal individual on the street, that it was seen this left of field, it was seen as woo woo. And breathing is not left of field, and nor is it totally right of field. Like literally, these are the tools right down the middle. So the breathing cure was my effort or my attempt to try and show that, listen, there is a good degree of support here. Okay, the science is still catching up, but look at what we have. It just makes sense. And it doesn't make sense to be going around with the mouth open. Ask anybody what part of the mouth plays any role when it comes to breathing. There is no part of the mouth that's there solely for the breath. The mouth does nothing. The mouth just allows air straight down your throat. It doesn't moisten, it doesn't filter, it doesn't regulate volume. And back in the 1950s or 60s, there was an American ear, nose, and throat doctor called Dr. Morris Cottle. He coined the Cottle maneuver. And he said that the human nose is responsible for 30 functions in the human body. And of course, I know the human nose is responsible for quite a few functions, but 30 of them. I put a list together myself and I found 30 functions of the human nose. And these are 30 functions of the human nose that the mouth doesn't live up to. And yet 25 to 50% of studied children are persistently mouth breathing. We have very few studies in adults. We have two studies that's all I am aware of, showing that 17% of the adult population mouth breathe. We know that people with sleep disorder breathing are much more likely to wake up with a dry mouth and mouth breathe during sleep, which aggravates their sleep apnea. But yeah, despite this, even the awareness still isn't kind of out there fully.
Hmm. Hmm. It's exciting. I mean, I think reading this book, you think, I don't know about Ireland, but the United States spends 20% of its GDP on healthcare. The next closest country is 11%, and we're not getting results. Reading this book, you think if everyone got your app, the Oxygen Advantage app, and started breathing, you could probably reduce disease just so radically and save billions, if not trillions of dollars in America.
I think improving breathing patterns, and I'll go beyond, I think, like I've observed it over the years, that it does impact major fields such as dental health, because if you have your mouth open, your mouth is more dry, you're more prone to gum disease, dental cavities. Children with their mouth open are more prone to craniofacial abnormalities. Respiratory, all those people with asthma, it's about 8 to 10% of the Western population.
Hmm.
Sleep, it's been well shown that mouth breathing during sleep is not good, upper chest breathing is not good. And the reason being is because when we think about sleep problems, obstructive sleep apnea or upper airway resistance syndrome or snoring are associated with a problem with the upper airway. But there's no differentiation between the upper airway and the lower airway. If we have a problem with the lower airways, we have a problem with the upper airway. So we need to think of breathing as a whole. Anxiety and panic disorder, you know, like people with PTSD, in terms of using breathing, that a function that's so vital to the human body, but we can exert some degree of control over. And
Hmm.
by doing that, we can help to bring, the nervous system into balance. We can also help to strengthen the baroreflex. We can help to improve heart rate variability, which is an objective measurement of vagal tone, or at least to give us some feedback of whether we are in a stress response or whether we are in, optimal balance.
I'm
And that's
logging
what the
that
breath
every night
does.
on my ring.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very easy these days. Yeah.
Yes, it is. So I would agree with you. Now, I didn't choose the title of the book, The Breathing Cure. That was the publisher, but I was just calling it breathing. But I didn't write at the back. You know, an understanding of functional breathing patterns will influence health across a number of different fields in medicine and dentistry.
Right, right, absolutely. And lower healthcare costs, and make happier people, happier marriages, lower stress rates, better digestion. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, will there come a day where we go to uh, a healthcare provider and they have a group breathing class, or they have a breathing class at the gym instead of just a yoga class or cardio kickboxing class?
I think so. I think so. We have a breathing class. Um, we have a sequence of different breathing exercises. You start off from number 1 to 11. It's 40 minutes. And it brings you through 11 different exercises to look at your breathing during rest, but also during physical movement. And, also a stressor breathing exercise. We use breath holding to lower blood oxygen saturation, to increase carbon dioxide. Now, we tailor the exercises to the individual, which is very important because I remember back in 2010, I had a lot of people coming into me with anxiety and panic disorder, and I had 3,000 people attend these small mini courses that I was doing over about 3 years. And with many of them, when I was giving them breathing exercises, if they went a little bit heavy on the breathing exercise, and it was my fault because I didn't give them always the precise instruction, because up until then I hadn't realized that air hunger, or that feeling, they would call it suffocation, that it would drive them into a panic attack. And I seen people get anxious. I seen people go into a panic attack just by changing their breathing patterns. And this is the experience you learn along the way. You then change your breathing technique. So when people talk about a breathing technique that's going to be suitable for everybody, I would say, listen, you do have to kind of tailor it. Like, look at breathing as like going to the gym. There's people that go to a gym, or they may do yoga, they may walk. There's people who may jog. There's people who are sprinting. So, we all have different capabilities, and breathing should be the same. And for anybody starting off, dip your toe into the water and listen to your body, because your body will tell you anyway, especially in terms of breathing.
It will. It will. Yeah, and when I do my YouTube videos and things like that for people with TMJ and sleep apnea and snoring and ear problems and things like that, you're trying to take the group some and help everybody, but you're going to lose some that can't do it. You're going to lose some that think, okay, this is no big deal. So you try and get it somewhere in the middle. I think your app does a really good job of that, though, right? Because you're having them log in the Bolt score, and then you're saying what category are you interested in, and it's taking you down this path. And if you guys, this Oxygen Advantages app is incredible. I'm like, wait, why isn't this costing hundreds of dollars for me to do right now? I mean, it's completely free. And you type in whether you have anxiety or you want better sleep or you want to mimic some high altitude training or whatnot. And then Patrick's app takes you through this process of, what is it, about 7 to 10 minutes a day?
Yeah, it's even more. It really depends. And the whole purpose of the app was that I wanted to generate awareness of breathing. So, and I wanted to have an app that it could be tailored. So we spent about 12 months putting, it was a lot of work went into it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's basically a huge spreadsheet with about 100 different um, variations of exercises, and then maybe about 15, 20 or 30 different sequences of individuals, and then matching the individual, their Bolt score, their state of health, to the breathing pattern, and then deciding one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening time, in order to develop a habit. So
Right.
yeah, so I think it's come out pretty good, and it's great to see people using it. Yeah, but
Yes.
yeah, we didn't want to monetize it. That was our philosophy. We didn't want to make. It was about getting the awareness out there.
What a blessing. Sometimes when I read the comments on some of the videos I have, people say, "Oh, I'm in XY country or whatever, and I have no access to healthcare, and thank you so much. You've changed my life," and things like that. And I'm just welling up with tears, going, "Oh my gosh, this person has help. They couldn't get help." And that is, it's such joy to do that and help people like that. I'm supposed to climb Half Dome here very soon, right? I was doing a heavy running uphill as hard as I possibly could, trying to keep my mouth shut. And we have mountains here in the area, and I got a little tendonitis in my Achilles, right? So I'm up to the wire as far as climbing Half Dome. It's 6,000 foot elevation change, 18 miles. Can I get some of the cardiovascular benefits of strenuous exercise? Can I mimic high altitude training with just sitting on my couch doing breathing exercises?
Sitting on the couch will offer some benefit in terms of maintaining a reasonable Bolt score. And if we think of it this way, when we do physical exercise, the body produces more carbon dioxide. There's also, of course, feedback from the muscles to the brain. Breathing is stimulated. But our sensitivity to carbon dioxide is going to influence some degree of how hard and fast we breathe.
Mm-hmm.
So an individual who's overly sensitive to the accumulation of carbon dioxide, if they do physical exercise, their breathing is disproportionate.
Right.
If we practice breathing exercise on the couch, and we're slowing down and softening the speed of our breathing to the point of air hunger, we reduce the chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. And with reduced chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide, it's easier to do physical exercise because ventilation is reducing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other aspect is in terms of strengthening and improving the function of the diaphragm breathing muscle. So here, light physical exercise with the mouth closed, because when the mouth is closed, there's a resistance to your breathing, excuse me, that's 2 to 3 times that of the mouth. So by breathing through the nose, there's more work involved in taking that air into the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
But also nasal breathing, the air is going into the deeper regions of the lungs. And as we breathe
It's
against
is
resistance,
it because it's narrow, it's accelerating the
yeah, exactly.
okay, got it.
Yes, there's a pressure difference there, which is enabling us. So it's kind of very interesting. We breathe through our nose, and the nose is putting a resistance to our breathing. But that very resistance to our breathing allows us even to take fuller breaths than what we would ordinarily, and again, you would feel that mouth breathing, you're going to aerate your lungs more.
Right.
No, nose breathing is better. It's more
It's like
optimal.
putting a nozzle on a hose and spraying it further,
Yeah, that's a good it's a good
right?
analogy, actually. Yes, yeah,
Right.
yeah, that works.
Okay,
That
I'll take
works.
it.
Um,
Uh,
and
so
then we would do breath holds. Like for example, breathe in
uh
through your nose, out through your nose, hold your nose, and just jog in the spot, holding the breath. Now, by doing that, you're generating a sensation of breathlessness that would be even going beyond your sprinting up and down the mountain.
mm,
And that degree of breathlessness, there's a psychological aspect because you're reducing your perception of breathlessness. You're also helping to strengthen the diaphragm because you have involuntary contractions of the diaphragm. You're helping to improve your body's tolerance of both hypercapnia, high CO2, but also lower oxygen. And so we would use different training routines for people who were doing climbs, such as say Kilimanjaro, for example.
hmm
And then on the mountain itself, when we ascend, the air is thinner.
hmm
And of course, then, even though the oxygen level is 21% of the atmosphere, so the concentration is 21%, but it's 21% of a lesser atmosphere. The atmospheric pressure is less as we ascend. There's a couple of problems with that. One is that the reduced atmospheric pressure, it causes our breathing muscles to have to work harder
mm,
because air moves from areas of high pressure to low pressure. And if there's a difference in atmospheric pressure, a reduction, we have to work our breathing muscles harder in order to get the same amount of air or oxygen into the body. The breathing muscles then are more prone to fatigue. If the breathing muscles are prone to fatigue, then blood is stolen from the legs to feed the diaphragm because
mm,
breathing will trump other functions.
mm,
So by physical exercising with the mouth closed, by doing breath hold at sea level, etc., all of that can help to strengthen, and you're adding an extra load onto the diaphragm. But then during the ascent, like how many people, because of the overly sensation of breathlessness, they're breathing fast and shallow. But the problem with fast and shallow breathing is that it increases dead space, and this is the amount of air that's lost. That, every breath that we take into the body, not all of that air that we bring in through our nose or mouth reaches down to the small air sacs in the lungs. The final 150 milliliters of air actually stays in dead space, so it doesn't ever reach the small air sacs where gas exchange takes place.
mm,
So I'll give you this example, Adam. Say, for example, we have during rest a person who's breathing 20 breaths per minute, and the size of their tidal volume is 300 mil. So they are breathing 6 liters across that minute. Now we want to find out, okay, they're taking 6 liters of air into their body, but how much of that air actually gets down to the small air sacs? We have 20 breaths per minute, multiplied by the tidal volume, which is 300 mil, but we need to subtract dead space. We
hmm
need to subtract 150 mil of air that stays in the nasal airway, in the throat, in the trachea, the bronchi, and the first 16 branches of airways. So then we're left with 20 by 150, which gives us 3 liters. So here the individual is breathing 6 liters of air into their body, but 3 liters is staying in dead space and 3 liters of air is getting down to the small air sacs. They are losing 50% of the air that they are taking into the body. Now, if they slow down their breathing, we'd say, I'm going to do a deliberate exaggeration here. I'm going to slow it right down from 20 breaths right down to 6 breaths, increasing the tidal volume to 1 liter. So 6 by 1 liter, it's still 6 liters as before. But now, because the respiratory rate has been slowed down and the person is taking fuller breaths, across the 1 minute, there's less air lost to dead space. So now we have six breaths multiplied by 1,000 minus 150, which is 850. So 6 by 850 is 5.1 liters. So even though we're taking the same volume of air into the body, because we're breathing fuller breaths but less of them, it's much more efficient. So I would always ask or encourage people, if you are climbing, just, of course, you feel that you want to breathe faster and shallow, but just bear that in mind, that it's a very inefficient way to breathe. And this comes back to not just on the mountain. How about the person who's having anxiety? Their breathing is fast and shallow. They feel air hunger. And it's
Mm,
kind of bizarre because the person is feeling suffocated, and in response to the sensation of suffocation, their breathing is fast and shallow, which is only feeding back into their suffocation.
right.
So this is no slow and low, and I think it's more so for the person with anxiety not to start learning new techniques when you're having anxiety. Learn these techniques in your normal everyday. And it's not just for somebody with anxiety. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a high pressured interview with five individuals on national TV. And they left me waiting for about 5 hours in the studio, first of all.
Ooh.
And then prior to the interview, they left me sitting outside the door for 7 minutes.
Oh.
And so you're about to go into this room. There's cameras everywhere.
Oh.
Of course, I'm not used to, okay, I've done some interviews, but nothing. It was a meeting for about an hour and a half. And I could feel my heart rate increasing.
Hmm.
And one of the assistant producers said, take a deep breath. And I says, no, I'm not taking a deep breath. So I started just taking a soft breath in through my nose, and a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. And I'm just standing there. Nobody knows that I'm doing anything. And over the course that I was waiting for that, say, I was there for 7 minutes, but maybe for about 3 minutes, I was taking a soft breath in and a really slow, relaxed, gentle breath out, because it was the speed of the exhalation. By me slowing down the speed of the exhalation, I stimulated the vagus nerve, which secretes acetylcholine, which caused my heart rate to slow down. So I brought down my heart rate by my breathing, but also with my attention on the breath, in terms of taking attention out of the mind and going into a flow state. And I walked into that room and I was fully there. I was ready to take what they were going
Dished out.
to, you know, of course. And, I feel they intentionally left me standing outside the room for 7 minutes.
Mm,
So here's an example. Like, it's not just for the person who's having anxiety, it's for any of us, that whenever we are in a challenging situation, use the breath as a tool to be able to self-regulate.
right. Right. And getting that, it's almost like that air hunger is an inoculation. It's like lifting weights. You're fatiguing the body, going to where it breaks down and the body gets stronger, kind of thing. Just
Yes.
like anything, cardio, the body does great with, sort of beating into submission and, telling it, okay, you're gonna have hunger, so your ability to process this air is going to go up.
Yes.
What you're saying is
Yes.
that keeping that air in the deep alveoli for a longer period of time, it's going to have time to extract more oxygen from it. And if you're breathing fast, it's not going to get all the oxygen from that air that's down there. And you're working really to keep that air in and out. And yeah, I mean, it's what you're saying is it's revolutionary. It's interesting, and I think everybody should be involved. Yeah, you name it. I think
Yeah,
you're.
and I think it's beginning to happen,
Yeah,
so it's all good. It's going in the right direction. Let's put it that way.
it is. It is, and we need it more than ever. I have so many people coming into my office with anxiety. It's a everyday occurrence. One thing that actually two more things. One is the wisdom teeth. A lot of us, we've had things that have caused us to do mouth breathing, be it processed food creating allergic rhinitis, environmental pollutants, not chewing good food, not even breastfeeding. The baby's supposed to take the whole alveoli and get that whole areola. I mean, the whole suck, swallow, breathe mechanism isn't getting accomplished. These nipples that are artificial are just allowing the milk to come out too fast. I mean, there's all these reasons that people have started to mouth breathe. And then the skull caves in, the palate goes up, and now we have the septum going to one side or the other, being pushed to one side or the other because it's on top of the palate, and it's a whole thing, right? And we're waking up to it. It's sort of a de-evolution that's happened to us as a species over the last 1,500 years or so, and we need to go back to evolving and not de-evolving, right? And so, But one of the consequences of that is we have an epidemic of removing the wisdom teeth. And instead of dentists, going in and expanding the palate, which can be done even on a 60-year-old, they have stem cells in the bones of the maxilla to allow that to expand and even bring down that palate a bit. What benefit do we have in a breathing sense of the wisdom teeth?
I think it's more so the wisdom, having wisdom teeth, it's more pointing to the fact that is your mouth large enough to be able to accommodate them?
The tongue,
And yes, I
right?
think that's the bigger one.
It's helping the mouth stay big. Also, maybe because you were saying, which is such an interesting analogy in the book, you say if you have a paper straw and you breathe fast through it, the paper straw will come in. If you breathe slow through it, it's not going to come in and block the airway. And we have this soft palate back here. If we're breathing in fast, it's gonna close in. Because I have some people where I open their nose, their mouth, their tape, and they're still snoring, and maybe even and it can just be the speed that they're breathing, and maybe those wisdom teeth helps that soft palate have a little more integrity.
Yeah, it's more say in terms of if is there space behind the wisdom teeth? If there's no space there, you know that it's not just about the width of the maxilla, but it's the forward growth of the maxilla.
Mm,
Whereas our ancestors would have this tremendous forward growth that the tip of their chin was nearly as far forward as the point of the nose. Whereas we have a lot of retronatia, the jaws are set back. And the problem with the jaws set back is that there's not enough room then for the teeth. And then
mhm.
dentists can be more prone to then extracting them. But the problem with extracting teeth is that it makes the jaws even smaller. So there's not enough room for the tongue, which
Right,
in turn is increasing the risk of obstructive sleep apnea. I
right.
think there needs to be a debate in dentistry about extraction. Um, and I would agree there has to be a total debate about the importance that the role of the dentist when it comes to identifying the risk factors of obstructive sleep apnea and also alerting the patient, and also in terms of orthodontics that children are given, because if children have their teeth extracted and for orthodontic reasons because of malocclusions, and malocclusion when the teeth are crooked, what's causing that? Is it because the teeth are too big or is it because the jaws are too small? And of course, many people are going to say either argument. But the thing about it is that the jaws in a child can be developed to house all teeth. And if those jaws are developed, there's enough room for the tongue, which reduces their risk for sleep apnea then for the rest of their life.
Hmm.
Because the primary, even though there's a number of characteristics in obstructive sleep apnea, the primary characteristic or phenotype that causes obstructive sleep apnea is anatomy.
Hmm.
And anatomy is referring to exactly what you spoke about, the high upper narrow palate, the jaws that are set back, and there's not enough room in the mouth for the tongue, and
Hmm.
the airway is compromised.
Maybe we should just cut the tongue. Just kidding.
That's been done too,
It's been
and I have
done.
seen it.
Oh,
Yes.
that's a shame. Yeah, you're not the average tongue size. We need to cut it. Um, Now, what if I want to get myself ready for a cardiovascular workout?
So what I would do is during your normal warm up is breathe nose slow and slow. So you're going to be warming up anyway for maybe 15-20 minutes. And during that time, maintain nose breathing during the entire warm up. But as you're warming up, also start slowing down the speed of your breathing to the point of air hunger.
Mm,
So you're deliberately increasing CO2 in the blood. That's going to dilate blood vessels and cause increased oxygen delivery to the working muscles. But at the same time, after a couple of minutes of focusing on slow breathing, focus on low breathing. So that as you breathe in, you feel lateral expansion and contraction of the lower ribs.
mm,
Now, then we go from that. I know there's a few steps involved in this, and I'll come back to it. And as the person is walking or doing whatever movement they are doing, we have them breathe in, breathe out, and hold their nose for maybe 10 or 15 paces, and then to let go and to breathe through the nose. And we do that a few times.
mm,
So we start off with nose, light, slow, low breathing for about, say, 5-10 minutes. That's your down regulation. That's the foundation. And then to upregulate, to open up the airways, to get the spleen contraction, to increase blood flow to the brain, we do about 2 easy breath holds and 5 stronger breath holds, or even just 5 breath holds of moderate intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going out there, and you want the individual doing a warm up, not just with their attention stuck in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Like last night I had a podcast with Michael Conlon, and he's a world class boxer, and we have some athletes of a really high international level, and they use breathing, and they use this as a typical warm up, because when they go into a ring or they go out onto a field, they want to go out there in flow states. Now, can we access flow state where our attention is moving simultaneously with time? It's almost as if everything is slowed down and the right action happens by itself and the play is effortless. But can we access flow states if our breathing is dysfunctional and we have sleep disorder breathing?
We
And
can't.
I would put it out there, I don't think so. So I
No,
think we have to get the physiology right first.
absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been a joy, and taking this journey into breath. I appreciate it. I think you're a gift to the world. What you're doing is wonderful. Keep it up. Keep writing. Keep influencing. I really appreciate it, and I thank you for coming on today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much, Dr. Fields.
All right. Wonderful.